Skousen, actually the book on strategic relocation, and you with KQN Channel 17 are smart enough to listen. Originating from the number moderate growth medium-sized metro area, Provo, Utah, the fabulous Rockin' Studios. This is the World Affairs Brief. Joel's co-hosts Paul Aitson and Tom Drashel.
Good morning to the World Affairs Brief. Unfortunately, we don't have our guest with us this morning. Joel Skousen is out of pocket and not available, but fortunately we have a good friend in Texas, Mr. Tom Drashel. Nice to have you with us, Tom.
Yeah, good to be and on this morning sometime. Keep us stealing his stuff. In fact, we're going to do a lot of it.
Actually,
cover a lot of it.
Yes, and we, everything he does provide information, and there's never been a single World Affairs Brief, Tom, that has not disturbed me and made me nervous and made me worry. The outcome of political affairs and world history that's coming right at freight train rates of speed.
It is fascinating and because this really is going on, and we're just not getting in the mainstream media. I like you every week. Gosh, it's great that he gets this stuff and he has the contacts and on it, week after week after week. But the truth is that that's the real surprise is that this stuff does a lot more. We're fortunate that we have access, and we have it early before the brief comes out. So.
It does concern me very, very much that one is talking about these things in the mainstream media. I was with my wife as I was reading, and that was, are Americans ever going to wake up? Are they ever going to do this? Even our politicians, even our good politicians, I intentionally don't say statesmen. I don't know if any statesmen anymore, but our politicians very just me that most of them are not aware of what's really going on behind the scenes. Fortunately, with all the information Joel has to him and the sources, personnel, and the confidential people provide him information, it makes our easier, but it scares the willies, Tom.
It scares me politically, economically, militarily, everything. So let's get into it.
Okay. And I say that if you have any questions for Tom or comments, you can feel free. We've had some calls in the past, and we're here at 1-776-13 100-776-1913, and just give us a call, and we'll be happy to entertain your question or your comment. Tom, the number one story in this day is ObamaCare be reformed, and according to the answer is, if we want to go into there, what is the answer?
Well, the answer is no, not really. And of course, he's going to say the thing he says, but I want to say the thing I say too. So I'm only going to be two. I mean, look, we all know that legislate economics. I'll say that for decades. Say that when you're a young guy, you can't legislate economics. You can't legislate. You can't legislate heaven. There are eternal laws, that operate. They're out there, we can't just decide we're going to do it the way we want. That's what politicians do. And so, Paul is saying, whatever is going to be temporary, change, the deceptive, trying to grow in against ObamaCare, and it demands the repeal. The Democrats, I think, are here, desperate to that they're Clinton leadership, and you've got Obama starting to go along with that. It's giving him a chance to say, I'm agreeable to that, and I'm stop, but to divert from the here to talk about the brief is, but to have about that about really is with ObamaCare. First, the obvious. That is what Joel's saying here, that cannot be reformed. They're going to at least temporarily try to do, and Bill Clinton is involved here saying that we need to make it off the president on and honors that the as people and let them keep got. Problem is they can't simply not politically possible. Insurance companies with these mandates cost more money, so you either higher cost policy, which is what ObamaCare is giving, or have taxes, or you just have our government more money like it. That's what it does. The more money and inflate the economy and more inflation and so on. You know, getting around. You have to. Do they? Are they just naive? And even so just naive, stupid, know that this and some other kind of talk about.
Tom, there's something project, and sounds like you're we're taught one and that is you can't highest quality, the lowest best service. It's impossible. So what
right.
You're all of the services that are being paid for insurance, we're going to short and we're going to take interesting questions and we're all going to keep your costs low. Simply from what I read in the World Affairs Skousen is virtually able to do
that. And ask the question: did they know that to begin with? Were they naive and stupid as all parties are saying? I'm or they're just not lying. It can happen. Lying and wanted to go ahead and nationalize care here. Whatever comes to that. My answer is from the very beginning. No, like Lenin, the terms all the Lenin's politics. There are only types of creatures. They're provocateurs. Few people exactly what, and then there's the rest of them that are useful idiots. You know, very of provocateur and useful idiots, and without getting into say that that's what it is, saying that the power to orchestrate you can't do. Know that. Don't believe Keynesian. Don't believe in economics. They believe in those arguments. Get some people, most people that are, our leaders, and if we understand the idea that is that you have to be able to fight, and that as long as we know who the enemy is, that we call it conspiracy. Nobody wants that there's a world going in the back room. Has always been politics, local level, state level, national level, politics.
Okay, we're
level.
Here, HQN, we're on television. Now, did you the background, Tom, when loud?
About 2 right in. That's
okay. Anyway, interesting to me is that what we're being not only by Joel Skousen, I have also recently read that you copies of, and that Obama, but a red is off of going on, and according to what I read, design failure, designed it.
Yeah, let's go to the table. I students, I said I have enough. Look, through what F said is that not important ever
history is one of his
That's right.
quotes.
And so the plan is for Obamacare to fail. And what happens after Obamacare fails? Well, there's the Democrats are going to spend a whole lot of time fixing it and so on. Let me lay out real quickly what I say the timetable will be. We have the individual mandate happening in January. Now we're already having the crisis, true crisis. Millions of people losing their insurance, not going to be able to get it by January, and they're going to have to pay huge prices, half again as much, double their so they're not going to be able to get what they had before. It's going to cost a fortune, and so we do have a big crisis there, and the individual mandate clicks in. But then a year from that, in January of 2014, as my old law school.
Okay, we're back on live in 5 seconds.
All right.
Welcome back to the World Affairs Brief by editor Joel Skousen. Unfortunately, Joel is not with us today. He's out of pocket. We wish him the best on his business. We are here live in Rock Canyon Studios, broadcast from Provo, Utah. We've got overcast skies up here. Tom, how about you down there?
We have overcast skies, and we got some cold weather down here, unseasonably uncold.
Now, down here means down in Tyler, Texas area.
East Texas, yeah.
East Texas, and I know that you fairly warm down there most of the year.
Yeah, we are. This is the time of year when we start feeling real smug about living, down in Tyler, Texas. But I got to tell you, I'm sitting, even though it's warm in the house and so on. You know how it radiates in a little bit from the outside, and I'm sitting here in the living room with a kind of a fleecy top on it. You know what you call this thing here. But it is chilly outside. I'm going to wear a coat today when I go outside.
Wow. Well, let me just say a couple of things before we start. First of all, if you have any questions or comments for Tom or I or regarding the World Affairs Brief, give us a call toll free at 1-800-776-1913. That's 1-800-776-1913. Now, Tom, we have groups lists that have contacted us prior to the show. As a matter of fact, I was on the air on the phone on Skype with some folks from Mongolia, and we'd like to say hi to them and welcome them and listen in. Tom, Joel has quite a following around the world. We actually heard from two people from Algeria, of all places, and one is named. We'd like to welcome you from Algeria, and hope you're learning about American politics and about Obamacare and some other things, and we'll get to some world affairs as well. So we have some people listening in from the storm-torn Philippines. They've been very loyal. Of course, Joel said he had a brother that had connections there. I also have connections there. And Tom, and to add insult to injury, with the largest storm to hit landfall in recorded history, with sustained winds of 218 miles an hour and gusts at 248, that storm hit and just ripped the country apart, much of the country. And I have family there, and we have been in constant contact.
I have a grandson there.
Oh, do you? Oh, my
on a mission, yeah.
Oh, so yeah, and so our one of our family members, a niece, was one of the last ones found that was missing, and we also have another one that is my wife's best friend's son, who we were at his farewell 7 or 8 weeks ago, and he was one of those who was missing with the other gentleman, the other missionary that only had 2 weeks left to go on his mission. Now, I will say that they had an earthquake this morning, Tom. Now, 3 weeks ago, they had a 7.2 earthquake, and this morning they had a 4.5, and many people still don't have a roof over their head, and there's just constant rain coming down on them. There's a lot of disease.
It's time to get out of town if you live in the Philippines.
Oh, it's just
terrible. You got to wonder about. Y'all have you have a lot of people over there, and interests and so on, and with those, you have to wonder with the testimony of the elements here in the latter days, it's going to get worse and worse. I mean, that we know that, and it is every year. Hurricanes, typhoons, earthquakes, and so on. It's going to get worse. When you're in those kind of places, like they're on the rim, it seems like they're getting more and more of the worse and worse of it. And this was a real jump though this year for the Philippines.
Well, and we will be talking about Asia and the TPP and how dangerous that is. But let's continue here with Obamacare real quickly. And
All right.
And
we have the individual mandate and we already have the crisis caused by the individual mandate starting in January 13. But the big biggie, as Dean Rexley from the old law school would say, is the employer mandate that comes in January of 2014 and that's where most Americans have their insurance, is from their employment, and that's when that's when we're talking about tens of millions of people, maybe hundreds of millions of people without insurance.
Well,
so you have to ask yourself, well, why would they do this? Why in the world would they let Obamacare come about and just be a planned failure and so on? And the answer is they never wanted this dinky little Obamacare. They wanted full socialized. They wanted single payer health insurance. They wanted full socialized medicine here in America, the same as you have in other major countries of the world here, the last bastion of good health and good economics. And so that's the purpose, is the old Hegelian tactic to create this terrible crisis, this true terrible crisis. They've created it, the Democrats with the aiding and abetting of the Republicans, and they're going to come up with a solution. And it'll be after after January of 2014. I'm sorry, we're in 2013. At January of 2015, that's when we'll have it, maybe by March or June or maybe by February. I don't know. But we're going to have single-payer health insurance. We're going to have full socialized medicine here in America.
And
is
of
that
course,
the end game?
And of course, the end game is really not the insurance, is it?
No.
The end game is control of fifth of our higher economy and control over all the information on people, everything about your health care. It is controlling whether or not you live or die. I mean, that is what Obama. And I think people, when they do wake up, as they lose their insurance, they're going to find out that it is everlastingly too late. Right now, I thought it was an interesting statistic that a lot of different talk show hosts like Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh and others are saying that there's 50,000 people approximately that have actually successfully signed up under healthcare.org.
I realized it had even up to that.
Another one just last night was 30,000. So you really don't know. Yes,
okay. But it is 1/10 of 1%. It is 1 out of 1,000 people who have gotten on the. Not just in America. It's 1 out of 1,000 people who've actually gotten through onto the website and gotten through it. Only 1 out of 1,000 have bought.
Yes.
30,000 people have bought.
And they have, and it hasn't even, the deal hasn't even been closed. According to the World Affairs Brief, said that after interviewing one of the enrollers, one of the negotiators, they found that they are taking the applications and they are transferring to PDF format, storing them, and there are literally tens of thousands of those forms. So even though you think you're enrolled, you're not.
We've got
they won't
50,000 paid Acorn guys or the likes, people who I think we say the likes. Right. The company that's running that, getting the $67 million worth of to pay these guys $24 an hour to be data inputters is basically what they're doing. Are
Acorn,
as you say, they're not even using the website itself. The website's not working for them. They're having to give up on that, and so they're just taking the information from the people, typing it out, putting it in PDF form, storing it because it's not approved. So those people that they're actually signing up don't have insurance yet, and we don't know what's going to happen. But what I'm trying to say here is, give it the best case scenario or the worst case scenario, it doesn't matter. It is going to continue to be a disaster. It's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse. And a year from January is the time that it's going to be the very worst. And all Americans will then be ready to say, you got to do something. We don't have insurance, and all hell is breaking. And they will say, look, the government's just going to pay for everything, and we'll do. And the Democrats, of course, that's what they want. And the Republicans are going to go along with it in a split second. So we'll have full single-payer socialized medicine here in America. As you say, that's not the end game. The end game, I mean, the purpose of that is to have control, and it's not just here in America. The end game is Well, let's talk about that. What would single-payer health insurance do? What would national health care do? Well, it would do what it does everywhere else. It runs up this unbelievable bill that no one can pay for. You have to ration health care and so on. But it costs a ton of money, and so the Fed has to print a whole bunch more money. It's wonderful for them. Follow the money, Rush Limbaugh and everybody else says. And it's true. The people who have control, most control in the world, the powers that be, are the people that have the money, the central banking families, the people that own the central banks, which are mostly these same families that owned and controlled our Fed here from the beginning and owned the European and other central banks of the week before that and since that. They're the ones who make all they do. They make money by printing money, creating money out of thin air, lending it to governments and interest on it. At least that's what we thought that's all they used to do. We now find out with a little peek audit here 3 years ago that they go ahead and print the money on their own and use it for their own purposes, all of it, the $16.1 trillion that they created. That's the equivalent of our entire national debt, 4 times our national expenditures budget. Yeah. And they just created it in 1 year, and they won't even tell Congress what they did with it. The point is, they make their money by creating money, and so they want governments to deficit spend. They want the U.S. to deficit spend with anything that costs money: Social Security, entitlements, welfare, certainly the biggest of all, which is nationalized health care. And of course, the granddaddy of all expenditures is war. They love war. War is what makes them all kinds of money. But national health care will accomplish the purposes of the have the greatest control. I don't want to say they run the world, because they don't have complete control yet, but they're moving rapidly in that direction. I still vote for my radical constitutionalist people that don't get part, at least on a national level, and yet for the most part they do have control of the media and politics and so on. So national health care here is solving that problem for them. It will create the inflation and the eventual economic downfall that we will have here in America with increased inflation, and as Joel says, probably 8 or 10 years away at least, hyperinflation, which then will quickly be followed by World War III.
And well, let me ask you a question. If
lead us to a new world order.
Yes, exactly. That's the end game, the new world order, the government dominance by the chosen few, and that's the war that has begun long before this life and continues through forced control of our lives and our freedoms. Tom, a question: 30,000, 50,000 people have successfully enrolled, yet it has not been completed. How many people have lost their insurance during that same period of time?
Well, the last figures that I heard were between 5 and 6 million, but that was 2 days ago. That we know of ones that have been 6 million. And again, I repeat, these are only individuals because the individual mandate happens. But when the employer mandate happens a year from now, January of 2015, we're talking about tens, scores, if not hundreds of millions of people without losing their insurance, and so government's going to have to cover it. I mean,
so we have. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say they have 50,000 or 100,000. But a good point was made this week that 5 million or that 6 million number is not accurate, and we will talk about that right after this. Now, Tom, we'll probably repeat that at the beginning of the next segment, which is 3 minutes from now. But let me say that a good point was made by Rush Limbaugh that it isn't 5 or 6 people, 5 or 6 million olds that have lost their insurance.
That's
and
right.
So the number is as easily 3 times that. It's 15 to 18 million people. And a comment made this week by Obama, which was caught by Joel Skousen on the World Affairs Brief, and that was that Obama said, "Oh, it's just an insignificant number of people," and to those few people that were affected by this, I apologize. He seems just to make it in order to justify himself, he just makes it worse and worse. His apologies are so meaningless, so empty, that certainly 15 to 18 million people that we know of is not an insignificant number of people in the United States. 15 to 18 million individuals who are uninsured at the present time.
It has been satisfying to watch him stumble around, and try to answer things and so on. And to give it to him, I do have to admit that here in the last couple of days, his speechwriters have he came up with his apology where he said, I'm sorry for those few people. It is important. It is a big deal to them, and so he tried to back off of that a little bit to be a little bit not just be so defensive of himself that he forgets about the people. But still, it has been a weak apology and a weak recognition of what he's been doing here. Someone said, look, with you got billions of dollars that have spent this. Why don't we just spend those billions of dollars and give it directly to the people? Well, if we'd done that, if you do the numbers and spend the billions of dollars, there's $1 billion just on the website. On the website and the implementation of the thing, you're looking at $1 billion there. That's a lot of money. And when you look at the billions of dollars that have and are going to be spent on it, the question is, why don't we just do that rather than going through the insurance and so on? That's ultimately the same argument as having single-payer insurance. And while we're at it, if the government does that, why do we stop there? The government can just spend whatever it wants, and we don't. And it really the chickens never come home to roost, whatever we say. Why don't we just legislate all of us $100,000 a year salary and be done with it, or $150,000 and cover our health needs also? Why don't we just do that here in America and quit all this stuff? The answer is.
Of the World Affairs Brief is to you by M. Skousen's worldaffairsbrief.com. To subscribe, click subscribe now. To make a comment, call KHQN at 1-800-776-1913, 1-800-776-1913.
Welcome back to the World of Brief with our wonderful expert guest, Joe Skousen, who is absent today. He's on business, and we miss him, but we will carry forth we'll sally forth into these unknown areas on our own without the.
It is. He is so wonderful. He is so detailed. He is so articulate. He understands and articulates it in such a way that he really is one of a kind. And yet, without him, we're glad to take up the slack and bloviate ourselves.
Yes, and for those of you who are unaware, Tom and I were talk show co-hosts on a Salt Lake City talk show station years ago. And so we also served together on an LDS mission in Norway before most of you were born, and we've been friends ever since. Tom, let me just remind our listeners who have joined us since we went to break, and that is the television people here heard, but the radio people didn't. And that is that how many people, Tom, have had their insurance canceled because of Obamacare?
Well, it's over 5 million. Maybe it's 6 or 7 million by now. We don't know the numbers, but it's let's just say 6 or 7 million.
Okay, so 50 or 100,000 at the most, and we know
families,
it's less than that. Yes, and so that is the issue, that it's families. So if you've got 6 million people that are 6 million policyholders, that typically represents a householder. It's usually amount 3 times that. So it is obviously not 6 million, but 18 million or 20 million actually. And Obama apologized to those very few, very rare number of people, which is just disgusting. But anyway, okay. So we've covered a lot on Obamacare. The bottom line, Tom, is what? What is Obamacare? What is the real purpose behind it? And what is going to be the future of it? And was it success? Is it ever going to be successful? Is it ever going to be cleaned up?
No, it's never going to be successful. It's never going to be cleaned up. It never was planned on it. I say what I say and you say, and that is that it was a planned disaster, and that it will lead us to after this next year. We're going to have the fighting about it. This is going to continue on for a year, and there'll be plenty of other crises that will, but it's going to continue on, but it will become the biggest crisis again a year from now when the employer mandate is coming up, and most Americans are going to lose their health care, and then we'll go to a single payer system.
Well, let me just say, yes. Now, Tom, the issue with me personally, mine is insured through her. They have already altered. We pay much more in premiums, and our deductible has doubled. So we bought the good plan, and yet now our deductible is over $3,000. Down the 50 insurance was going to hold it on it. Our family.
Worse. And throw their hands up. I'm talking about Republicans. I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm talking about conservatives. I'm not talking about crazies. They're just going to throw their hands. We're a single payer and full social. Go to the go in there and the coat. It's just medical care. You have to pay and but they didn't quality. They my one that went to Russia not letting you go. You got to get the MRI. 18 months will be done. So we said 2 weeks. I'm sorry, Chris, Utah, and he still left on time. I mean, within a week, and it was gone. We're going. That's the way it's going to be here in America. We're going to be not Canada. Ultimately, we'll be as it is Soviet Union and so like that. Bring about it here. More money, printing more money by the central banks, and inflation and hyperinflation and worldwide economic downfall. What do we call that? And ultimately World War III here. All right, so we've gone to the end game. Shall we transition?
Yeah, let's do. But let me just say one thing, a reminder to you, Tom. If you recall, when I was serving in Norway, I lived in a little town up north called Mo i Rana. And we were playing kick the can with the neighborhood kids, the kids that were in the primary. And my hiding place was on top of a little shed. And it was springtime, and I jumped off the roof, and I landed on a piece of ice that was hiding under the grass and broke my leg. And so it happened to be the holiday. It happened to be May Day over there. And we could not even get into an emergency hospital. There were no doctors, no nurses, no staff. I said, what would happen if there was an automobile accident or there was a heart attack? And they really didn't have an answer. They said, well, it's best not to have those things on holidays. So,
especially in a socialized medicine country.
And so since the bus system and the taxi system were shut down because of the holiday, I hobbled with a handmade cane all the way to the hospital only to find out I couldn't be seen. So finally, I was transferred back down to the mission Oslo. I was sent to the Rikshospital, the main hospital, the government hospital. Mm-hmm. And the man said, oh, it just doesn't really look that bad, and he sent me. The mission president got upset and sent me back. They wouldn't see me for another 3 or 4 days, and this man was upset. It was actually a woman. She put a cast on me. And I came back on my regular visit a week later, and the man took the cast off. I came back for a check, and the woman put it back on again. I came back a week later, and the man took it off again. Said it's healed by now. And now, as you understand, it's only 3 or 4 weeks instead of the typical 8 to 12 weeks for a broken leg. And so I decided I wasn't going to go back again, and I slowly healed over the years. And I think I had better care just by self-healing. But I still do walk with a little bit of a limp sometimes if I'm playing basketball for a while.
Yeah, I didn't know about that. I'd never heard. Of course, I was over in Vermont, and
Yes.
lost contact during most of the mission there.
Well, and the thing that happened is that that was socialized medicine for me. I also visited the dentist. I also reasons to attend and just chose not to. And I feel so badly I had kidney stones in Sweden about 12 or 15 years ago, and because I was not a Swedish national, they refused to treat me, and I was in the middle of one that I've ever experienced in my life, and I couldn't even get asked. And so we hurried and booked our flight back home to America so I could get care and get a lithotripsy.
Yeah, I don't know if we have any idea here in America, what it's going to be like but we're going to have it. We're going to be there, and we're going to be there in a little over a year, I say, maybe a year and a half, something like that.
Well, let me. There was a story that was inserted by Joel between the time we got ours yesterday and this morning, and it was really an interesting one. I didn't hear it, and we won't get into it because I think you're not aware of it either. But an Obama peer in Hawaii school days outed him as both gay and a chronic liar. And what I would say to you people who heard that headline, we don't have time to get into it, but I will say this to you: you need to subscribe to the World Affairs Brief. You go to worldaffairsbrief.com and you click on subscribe. Now, if you want a free issue, and you can have today's issue for free, you can write editor@worldaffairsbrief.com. That's editor@worldaffairsbrief.com, and Joe will send you a free issue. But there are many, many things. There's 95% of everything that we talk about we do not have to get into that's available to you on the World Affairs Brief. Very important story, Tom, that is in the World Affairs Brief entitled Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah, they're calling it TPP,
yes.
And it's a new round, a bigger round of new free trade agreements. The big deal is, you remember 20 years ago when NAFTA was being pushed, North American Free Trade Association, and the Free Trade Agreement, the treaty.
Yes.
Well, we had the treaty and the World Trade Organization. That was a big enough deal. That was a big deal because we're transferring some of our national economic sovereignty to supranational or fully world organizations like the WTO. But in those cases, we're only giving the judicial, what I would call a judicial function. What we're talking about with the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the subsequent European, and ultimately everything in the world except for China, apparently, we're talking about giving them full legislative and executive powers to make the laws and to carry them out, this Trans-Pacific Partnership. And so the question in my mind is, how do they get away with this? Why do Americans allow this? This is a treaty, and the Constitution says that any treaties that are made pursuant to the Constitution are also, just like the Constitution itself, the supreme law of the land here. The question is, are these treaties pursuant to the Constitution? Can our president sign, and can the Congress, Senate ratify a treaty that gives power to a world organization to make some laws and then to execute those laws, which will then be judged by the World Trade Organization or NAFTA, depending on what's the appropriate.
Breaking our radio live with you on our television broadcast to YouTube, Facebook, and Google Hangouts. The thing about this what this does, it's an end run around the American Constitution, Tom.
It is. You got to get rid of the Constitution.
Because the Constitution has always stood in the way of the globalists, and they have to have it go. And they've tried every plan and scheme that they can to neutralize it. And this thing has been all negotiated behind closed doors, and not even American legislators are allowed to have documents and to see a little. But they're not even allowed to know what is going on, and it'll literally replace our Constitution with a treaty that oversees the sovereignty of its citizens, of our citizens.
It is. As Joel says, it would create regional governments, and ultimately with this, plus the European one and the everything except for China. You're talking about a global government. It is a New World Order global government. They're going to meet. He calls it the cabal. I love that.
Yes.
The cabal. They're going to meet in Salt Lake City.
Amazing.
Between November 19th and 24th.
They're right here in Salt Lake City. They're going to be negotiating away our constitutional freedoms and rights, or constitution.
How is it that they're doing this stuff right in our face? You know, you got the main NSA data World Spy Center right there at the point of the mountain, and now they're going to do this. You know, it's way out of the way. Reasons, of course, is it's way away from work in Houston and Dallas and Paris and other places that are, you know, centers of where you might have more people paying attention. If it's going on over there, it's not happening in Mo i Rana,
yes.
Norway or something. That was a cold place to be, wasn't it?
It sure was. The warmest that got that winter was 54 below zero, Tom.
No, gee, you may as well have been in Siberia.
Yes. All right, we're back live. Welcome back live to the World Affairs Brief, featuring the World Affairs Brief by Joel Skousen, and he is not with us today. He's on a business trip, and we miss him. Wish he was here. We'll feel he can. Questions or comments for either Tom or I, or questions about the World Affairs Brief, give us a call at 1-800-776-1913. That's 1-800-776-1913. We're glad to have you with us today, and we're always very grateful for listeners and viewers, and we do have a lot. Tom, did you know that Joel is our #1 most popular, successful show on this entire station, 24/7?
And well, he should be. Yeah, it makes sense. You know, this TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership here, we're not another NAFTA or World Trade Organization. We're not just talking about economic stuff. You're really talking about full government. These cover intellectual property rights and so on, but it affects everybody, everything that they do. And so the TPP will cover 40% of the world
gross national
GDP.
Product. Yeah, that's right. And
40%, and with the U.S. European Union transatlantic trade, it's the same thing. Well, it'll cover 60%.
That's right.
It excludes China because, as Joel says, they apparently want to run their own versions of the New World Order.
And you know, you remember Mr. Assange of the WikiLeaks fame. He made it as a wake-up. Publish, listen, dance, sing, or invent. Or if you farm or consume food, if you are ill now or might be ill in the future, the TTP has its crosshairs on you. Now, did he miss anyone there?
that pretty well covered a lot of what I plan on
but
doing in the next year.
The fact control your religious freedoms. And
you know, the scary thing about this is that where's the? Oh, here you go. This is their wording. He says enforcement will be accomplished by, quote, supranational litigation tribunals to which sovereign national courts are expected to defer, end quote. It's worse than that. The supranational tribunals are already there, NAFTA and the World Trade Organization, but this will allow these organizations, supranational entities, they're governments, to actually create the law and then to carry out the law, and then it will be judged by their sister organizations that already exist. And it says, to which sovereign national courts are expected to defer. Is that nervy? Is that heady? How do they just expect that
the U.S. Supreme Court?
Sovereignty.
The U.S. Supreme Court will have no jurisdiction. They will defer to these new international courts that will determine what happens to every individual sitting in the United States of America. Their sovereignty Their rights, their constitutionally protected freedoms are no longer going to be protected because of these international courts.
And you know, I got to say this. I think they're right. They're certainly wrong, but I think they're right if they accept to defer to it. I expect that we will. We're already deferring to NAFTA. We're already deferring to the World Trade Organization. You don't hear about it in the media, but you know, when there's a trade dispute and it goes to NAFTA, it's just like being at the UN in the General Assembly. There, 90% of the time they vote against the U.S., and that's the way it happens at NAFTA. That's the way it happens in the World Trade Organization. And we have gone along with. Why do we go along with this? Why is it that our congressmen and senators are just up on their heels, raising hell, and saying we're not going to stand for this? You know, we're Americans, and we got our national sovereignty, and we got our Constitution is the supreme law of the land, not some national organization. Why are they not doing? Is it because they're just swamped with all these other things, and they don't have time to think about it? You know, I don't have good answers for that. They're grown men and women who can read English, and they can see what's going on, and they have staffers who ought to be able to tell them, look, this is something you ought to know about, you know, and maybe we ought to be considering doing something about here. But it's politically incorrect. The truth is that the great majority in Congress, I mean the great majority in Congress, truly are useful idiots. I've worked, you know, in Congress and lobbied in the state legislature in Utah and Texas, both, and I'm telling you, those people are not as smart as I don't know, maybe they're just the same as average Americans, but they go along with leadership. Most of them, you know, they may have some area of expertise, but look at it here. Even on the news, the people that you see there you see the few really liberal leaders and the few really conservative leaders. You don't see the other 80 senators and the other 420 congressmen.
You know, and Tom, there's concerns to me. It reminds me of when you step into the curtain to vote on Election Day. Most of the names you look at, unless you have done your research beforehand, they're all just foreign names to you. And that is the same with our congressmen and our senators. A bill comes on the table. If the leadership supports it 95% or more of the time, they vote for it.
That's the way it works. I got to say it. We may as well say it knows the way it is. Maybe we all suspect it. I'm a precinct chair and election judge. That's one of the little things I do down here to stay broke, you know, to do this free stuff. But I notice on the elections when they come in, I would say probably, this is just my gut feel, the best I can come up with, but probably at least 90% of the people who vote a straight party. Now, either they just hit the button that says all Democrat, or they hit the button that says all Republican when we were having the partisan elections, or they just vote all Republicans, boom, 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 or they vote all Democrat, boom, 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 boom. There's I'd say 1 in 10 is the maximum, and maybe not that much, who actually will cross over party lines and vote one. And that's the way it is. We just have straight, and that's the way it is in Congress for the most part. Pretty much a straight party. You see these emails that come, and it shows that there was who supported Obama in his signing the UN gun control deal. You know, there's not a single Republican on that list. It's just all 46 Democrats who did it, and a few Democrats who didn't. But not a single Republican, and that is extreme. But it's not far from the way it is on many votes. Like you say, they just they go along with the leadership, either because they don't know any better, or because they want to keep their mic time and their staffing and their committee chairmanships and be able to get and so on, and in their minds be a player, you know.
Tom, we have less than 4 minutes, and there are two stories that I think they're critical to get to, and try to spend 2 minutes on each. One is the state of Utah is trying to get into the act of nullifying and neutralizing this big, huge NSA center here that's gathering information. Now, as you and I know, there's been several fires and explosions there. They're having a hard time solving these problems. Some people have even told me they think that's an answer to prayer. The water is a big issue. Why do I say the water is a big issue? Because 1.7 million gallons of water is used every day to cool these great big giant computer systems. And the water is being pulled out of the Jordan River, and there are people angry about that. Who approved this, that they're using our electricity, using our water? And so there's a group of people trying to shut this whole thing down. But Tom was very grateful that they're trying to do something, but he is very skeptical they'll be able to accomplish it because of even the conservative leadership in Utah is so afraid of offending the federal people.
Yeah, you got the 10th Amendment Center trying to shut down the NSA Data Center to protect Americans' 4th Amendment rights and 10th Amendment rights,
Yes.
the states' rights. But it's not going to happen, as you said, because for several different reasons. One is that the political leadership, you do have Gary Herbert, who's more conservative than Huntsman was, and he just had the governorship dropped in his lap when Huntsman took off there. But Gary Herbert went along with Orrin Hatch, and Orrin Hatch took the lead, and they lobbied to get these jobs over here in Utah. Don't worry about the fact that we're raping America. But we're going to get jobs in Utah, right? And so he had a hard time politically backing off of that and saying, look, we're not going to let you do this. They could do this. They have the legal right. Their constitutional, their Supreme Court cases that say that states don't have to go along. If the national government wants to violate their rights, states don't have to go along with it. Of course, there's also something in the Constitution that says that we can stop the national government from doing that, but we're not doing it. I think the bottom line, he's right. Gary Herbert's certainly Orrin Hatch isn't going to do it, and Gary Herbert is not going to do it either. And even if they did try to do it, the government would just go ahead and do it anyway, because there's no way in the world they're going to stop the spying. They've got it here any more than the Democrats are going to give up Obamacare. They're going to go ahead and we're going to have the spying there, but it's a very interesting story.
Well, and let's move on to the new Russian combat drone. I know that we've talked to some of our guests here on the air throughout the week, and they don't believe that Russia and China are a threat. They think that we're just dreaming. But more and more information is coming out. Can you just touch on that quickly? There's new weapons, and yes, Russia and China are a growing threat and they are expanding their military strength and their combat weapons. Yeah,
we're talking about long-range drone aircraft with Russia, and of course he goes. This is so detailed. They need to get this World Affairs brief because he goes into a lot of the technology that Russia and Red China have. Anybody that doesn't believe, Russia has 2.5 times the ICBMs that we have. China now has plenty of short and medium range, and they're starting to get long range. They have all the technology. They've just got to build it up. But let me read this list real quickly. That was put out, and Joel added to it. This is what we're looking at. Russian military conditioned to use nuclear weapons. Putin openly repeated threats of using nuclear weapons. Russian
Tom,
ICBM.
I'm going to interrupt you. We're going to continue with television, but we're at the hard end of the show, but we'll continue on with this list and this story. Glad to have you with us today here on KHQN 1480 on the World Affairs Brief with Joel Skousen.
Well, they're just talking about Russians. So many more 750 kiloton multiple entry, and then China, 3,500 nuclear weapons, and then the recent boasts of Chinese nuclear capability against the U.S. and the Russian nuclear expansion.
Repeat that one again, Tom, because people don't. They are actually boasting about Chinese.
Oh yeah, China has threatened. I mean, they're not quite as bad as North Korea, but they have boasted that they have the capability to reach the U.S. now with long-range and they do have that. They have all the technology. They already have. They've got to have the capability. They just don't have the numbers yet, so they're not ready for nuclear war. They got to finish their underground building. Russia has pretty much finished their underground building, and they for many years, a couple of decades, have had plenty of long-range nuclear weapons and multiple entry
and mobile devices.
But what the story about is about these these long-range Predator drones. We're talking about Predator drones that just don't go up there like Obama didn't blow up Al-Awlaki, but we're talking about that can carry nuclear weapons. Long-range Predator drones that with mid to high level. So easily EMP strikes,
Where did they get these drones, Tom? Where did they get these drones?
Well, as Joel points out, we pretty much export all of our tech. They copy it, they watch, and they don't just copy. We give it to them. We either allow them to steal it, we sell it to them, or we give it to them, like we did to the Chinese. And so they have the technology right after we do, pretty much after we do. They got it because we have it here, and we've allowed them to have it. The world powers that be are pretty much. It's a dangerous game when you're trying to keep things relatively not even, but them not too far behind us, so that there is a threat, and so that they can they intend to manage that ultimately, and who's going to come out on top, New World Order East or New World Order West. But the point is they've got Predator drones now that can take nuclear weapons. You don't have to worry about ICBMs. You just fly them over here on Predator drones.
Yes, exactly.
Is that scary?
And then I'm going to read the last statement in this section on Joel Skousen's new World Affairs Brief. It says, my explanation, this is Joel speaking, my explanation for this blindness and suicidal conduct is unique, that the globalists are actively trying to weaken America and induce an attack on the U.S. military in order to justify calling for a militarized global government in order to prosecute this future war. Now, this last sentence is so important. This is worse than treason. It's a betrayal of such proportions that it exceeds all the evil we have experienced thus far in the history of the earth.
Yeah, I think he's right about that, too. We have been, for the powers that be in the world, America has been too strong in the past, and you can't have world government if you have a strong national entity like we have over here. They've got to down America. They've got to weaken us to the point that where Americans are willing for us to join a global military organization, have a world war, and have a global world government here, and get rid of the U.S. Constitution, get rid of our freedom, so that we can have this world plantation, and then we'll have peace.
Yes, exactly.
The slave masters, and someone's got to be the enforcers. And I am very concerned, by the way, that it's going to be the Chinese who are the enforcers. I don't want the Chinese to be the enforcers.
Heartless.
Of course, I don't want the Turkish to be it either. But.
Yes. Now, there's three last stories we do not have time to cover. There's a couple that we didn't cover as well regarding France and Syria and so forth that you need to read. These last three titles are The U.S. Courts Undermine States' Illegal Immigration Laws. That's a very disturbing story. Why GMO Labeling Initiatives Fail. GMO means with Monsanto and Agrigo and some of these companies, food poison in our crops, poison in all of the different things we consume. And remember, they made Agent Orange, and yet they're allowed to do it with impunity. It scares the daylights out of me. And finally, folks, there's a story about stocks are breaking record on Wall Street with a flat economy and a new manipulation. I know that this week there was a buyout of the New York Stock Exchange again, and new control is taken. If you think we had manipulation before, wait till you see what's coming now. Any last comments before we close out on today's show, Tom? No,
just like the stock market, we can only wonder how long this can go on before things fall apart.
All right. Well, we're very glad to have you join us today here on the World Affairs Brief on KHQN 1480. Tom, we're pleased that you were able to voice in with us today and help us through this show without Joel. Glad to have everyone with us, and we'll see you next Monday at the same time, 8 a.m. Okay, Tom. Thanks a lot.
Hey, it's kind of fun without Joel.